Well, also, I'd like to thank you for allowing me into your homes for this 25th episode of Season 3 of Esoteric Science Roundtable. And I would like to begin by thanking everyone that took the opportunity to come out to the metaphysical and philosophical meetings that we here at Esoteric Science Roundtable and the fine folks at Therefore I Am, Jeff Contreras and crew, co-host once a month. And so I want to thank everybody that took the time to come down. I think I actually had an opportunity to speak to everyone that attended, and that's a little bit rare. So I was thankful to have an opportunity to do that, and again, grateful for everyone that took the time and effort to come down and visit with us. Let's see. Okay, today I want to discuss the topic timidity, which essentially means lack of courage. And some may the titles that I use are sometimes always not exactly dead on to exactly the whole theme of the show, so I'm going to do my usual roundabout way to ultimately get to what I mean by timidity and the lack of courage that is a definite hindrance and drawback to a lot of the constructive work that has the potential to be carried out, that is really held in abeyance or held back or prevented by the simple lack of courage or timidity, the condition or quality of timidity that is unfortunately too prevalent in those that would be otherwise capable of helping out humanity at some level. And so I want to start by touching upon an idea or concept that I tend to bring up on occasion, which is the idea that energy finds its way into the minds of men in the form of ideas, archetypal ideas that are the building stones of our thoughts, like the idea of the pyramid and things like that, that circle, things like that, that tie back into the creative process at the most intimate level, at the highest levels. And they still carry over into our brain consciousness, into our mind, through our mind, and allow us to, again, use the brain in conjunction with our mind faculty so that we can intuit and understand, so that we can carry out our daily affairs. And so ultimately, as a result of this process, the race can unfold in its evolutionary process, and there can be an upliftment and unfolding of this evolutionary process through humanity, and as well as other kingdoms in nature. But the idea that this energy can be differentiated ultimately into 7 distinct forms, and this ray energy finds its way into the minds of men that tend to be more in line with this particular energy. And so in the case of the governmentally minded or politically minded individual, they find themselves gravitating towards the first ray of will or power. Devotional individuals that are more centered in the emotional nature might find themselves along the 6th ray of devotion or idealism, and might find themselves in more of a religious scenario or religious type work. The teaching ray is the 2nd ray of love wisdom. Some of the social programs are characterized by what's known as the 3rd ray or active intelligence, and the scientific community is conditioned by the 5th ray, which is also highly, it also reflects the quality of mind very much within that 5th ray, and that is the ray of concrete science. And so these differentiated energies find their way into manifestation and find their way into ultimately the brain consciousness through the faculty of mind in various men and women, obviously, as they can grasp and understand and perceive of these ideas. And so they have to be able to receive them initially properly. And so different people are going to be their body types and things of that nature, and their positions in the world, and a lot of other factors are going to have to be considered in order to get the full comprehensive picture of who certain individuals are that would be more capable or in the right place at the right time, and a lot of other circumstances to be the receivers of any kind of impression that's finding its way, kind of just floating like radio waves. And some people tune into them, and some people are oblivious that the radio waves are even existing. Again, that deals with our perception, individual perception, and growing more so and more so into the future will be the idea of group perception, even the idea of group initiation, and I won't really get into that so much, but unfolding of spirituality and unfolding of consciousness through humanity is, again, it's the ideas of cooperation and sharing are becoming more prevalent in the minds of men, and in the world at many levels, and so that's reflecting itself in the group endeavor and how energy not only affects individuals, but it conditions groups. It conditions family groups, nations, groups of nations would even be under some sort of array conditioning and energy conditioning. And so as men or groups take this energy into their understanding and work with it at some level, once it finds direction into some outward physical manifestation, then that energy becomes force. It takes on direction based on our intent, and so energy becomes force. And oftentimes force is just that. It's forced on or forced into the world, and people fall subject to that forcing in many cases. And we can see examples of this across the spectrum in many areas of human endeavor. But nonetheless, this idea of ideas being changed into some kind of directional activity, some kind of force that finds its way into manifestation. And we can see, again, many examples of this. The idea is to, well, the point of consideration is to study and consider the different types of individuals and, again, groups, and understand how it is that they are more receptive to certain ideas or information, and how they can intelligently cooperate and work together once we find sympathetic or synthesis of ideas taking place, and that these different ray types find themselves in harmonic conjunction. And so we find like work being carried out through, for instance, in the sense of the 7 rays, 1, 3, and 5, the odd numbers would be more in line or in conjunction, as the even numbers like 2, 4, and 6 would be sympathetic to one another. And so love, wisdom, being the 2nd ray, would be sympathetic with the idea of devotion or idealism, the 6th ray, which rules religion. And so you can see love, wisdom, and religion being components or harmonic in a harmonic relation to one another. And that follows suit again with this other unfoldings of energies. Now, also getting back to some other larger cycles that are unfolding that tie in, and that I've touched on over the previous weeks, but I want to go back over a bit because they are of such an important point of focus that it bears, repeating, that I consider or I lay these ideas out for consideration. And that being, again, the Piscean age leaving, and that is the age that is conditioned by the 6th ray, devotion, idealism. And so idealism and devotion to political parties, religious dispensations, sports teams, all that fanaticism, the idea of a fan, a fanatic, that's a devotional aspect. Anytime somebody's just hardcore stuck to some theme, some idea, or something of that nature that they just can't shake and it just consumes them, that oftentimes is part of this 6th ray of devotion. Not in every instance, but oftentimes it has a large part of the conditioning. And we can see people that have a 6th ray makeup in their bodies, whether that's their emotional nature or their thinking nature or what have you, will be more receptive to that flow of ideas. It'll find a ready, fertile ground in those individuals, and they'll be the ones that will be more capable of working through those particular areas in those arenas by virtue of the magnetic attraction to those energies. And so in the minds of men and groups, again, will work these energies out at some level into manifestation. And as to how this cooperation of this moving out comes into being, that's part of the question that's yet to be determined. We have the potential, again, another cycle, the 5th, this is currently our current race, if you will, or the dominating aspect of our race currently is the 5th subrace of the Aryan race, so-called. And that, again, the number 5 tying back to mind and the concrete science idea. But we tie in and we tap into, by virtue of being the 5th subrace of, again, the post-Atlantean or the Aryan races. And there's also a 5th, there's a 5th race and a 5th subrace, actually, that are in the process of coinciding and culminating right now. And so as that great cycle passes and a new incoming ideology manifests among the sons of men, that won't be an ethnic type per se, as it was with the 5th subrace, which is the Anglo-Saxon race, again, that conditions world affairs to a large degree. And we can see that in effect, but we can also see it rapidly passing out. And so once again, we find that those in control are kind of in a death throw, in a sense, and that they're holding on to what they've been able to achieve and accomplish over this long amount of time, and they feel that it's still adequate and useful, when cyclic necessity and human evolution and just the spirit moving through matter dictates otherwise, and shows and demonstrates and indicates that we need, and it's part of the cyclic unfolding as well, this new Aquarian impulse, so-called, based on cooperation, sharing, synthesis, and the coming together of ideas. And so separating fanatic ideas that say me, will subside, and ideas of group cooperation and coming together will be more prevalent and prominent in the minds of men, and again, in groups, because it has to be a group component that brings in group synthesis and cooperation. Individuals can be, group-minded, but they're going to have to work through groups at some level. That's just how these things are unfolding. And so the sooner the idealistic individuals can appropriate and understand these concepts and implement them practically, the more readily we'll be able to manifest something of real, rare beauty on the planet through the workings out of humanity. It's possible, it's right on the cusp, but it's just a matter of understanding the opportunity and doing what we can, having courage and not being in the state of timidity and having lack of courage. We need to have courage and stand forthright with our understanding and stand battle ready in our sense of knowing, and realize the potency that we have, and realize the potential that we have, and not just shirk responsibility and not just stick our heads in the sand. There has to be, again, a real implementation of courage, and the idea that we have to take action on behalf of ourselves, be self-responsible, self-reliant, not look to others or other groups to come and rescue us from whatever situation we may find ourselves in, largely of our own making in many cases. When we get ourselves into trouble, we always start looking around for who can help me out, who can pull me out of this mess, not really firmly considering, I got myself in this mess to begin with. That's not, the self-responsibility aspect doesn't always kick in all of humanity. And so considering that we have, through this evolutionary process, an opportunity to improve ourselves. And there are, again, various systems, as I've been discussing over the previous several months, esoteric systems and other means by which one can train and improve oneself in whatever area they choose. In this day and age, there's a lot available. So it's really up to us as to where we want to place our efforts, what areas of endeavor we want to pursue. And so, again, keeping in mind that the evolutionary process has gone on far back into antiquity, and it's allowed through all this long time, these previous great cycles, Atlantean before our current great age has been in effect for millions of years already anyway, and then before that Lemurian. And so I am talking about tremendous cycles of time that are not easily accepted or understood by academia and establishment. But nonetheless, esoterically understood, these great cycles did transpire, and we've passed through them, and so this has allowed for much evolutionary opportunity for the race of men. And so certain individuals that have been able to tap into these ideals, these ray energy ideals, and manifest them in their own efforts at some level, have been the shining examples of humanity throughout time, and they've been the ones that we can perceive of as head and shoulders above the masses, and that they've had some idea or something that they've been able to implement at a large scale that stood the test of time and become part of the fabric of our unfolding, our evolutionary unfolding. And so as this takes place, we can again look back into antiquity, look back in the past, and see the shining examples of those individuals that have been the ones to carry the torch for humanity and be the way showers and the indicators for future unfoldings. And so this relationship between the more advanced humanity and also those that have guided the process, that stay and work behind the scenes largely, have an intimate and integral relationship based on this evolutionary process. And it ties back to, again, the old mystery tradition and these schools that took place far back into antiquity that were implemented by the guides of the race that tend to work behind the scenes, again, primarily, that were able to establish these centers or these schools or these institutions for the unfolding of our humanity's evolution. And it's taken place. Initially, we learned to master the physical vehicle far back into antiquity, millions and millions of years ago. Then we mastered more so the emotional nature and the concept of desire, and we had to build into ourselves a concept of desire. We really initially were, before we became self-conscious, we were more animal-like and more driven by instinct, sheer instinct that the animals still have in effect in this day and age. We became more desirous through the evolutionary unfolding, and this was helped along, if you will, and these conditions were nurtured through the watchers over the race that again helped to guide and show the way for us and to train us in a sense to be more fit, to be more human, to realize the full potential of humanity, because the condition of humanity is vast and extreme, and very few in our human history have lived up to that high watermark and met that high example. But there are examples for us to look back on, and we can again see this relationship between these really outstanding members of humanity and the group or body that works behind the scenes largely to guide and again be a way shower for humanity. And so this group, known as the hierarchy for the most part, or Christ and the Church Invisible, the Masters of Wisdom, many terms that are applied to this group, and that again are also human, but have demonstrated a fuller capacity of our humanity and maintain a larger, fuller understanding and expression. And so they're able to work more potently and in a larger, more comprehensive fashion. Matter of fact, they're able to have the type of prevision and forethought that allows them to see a bit further into the future as far as the variable potentials. No one can really predict the future accurately, but we can look at the leading indicators and be intuitive and understand what the potential is that's likely to unfold at different levels. Certain people are going to have that ability and have a more acuity and access to that energy, if you will. And so we see that demonstrating itself in different levels as far as who can perceive and how they can transmit it into something that's understandable and accessible for others. Again, considering that this body of workers, this hierarchical group, does not impose on the human free will. They work with the will aspect of God, which is what Christ demonstrated, the union that Christ demonstrated through the work that he accomplished. And so this hierarchical group, which you can consider as the modern day disciples of Christ in a sense as well, are those that work most intimately with the will aspect of God. And they are most capable to understand the fuller picture from that potent place. Not all of humanity can perceive, well, humanity can really dimly perceive the will aspect of God, and that's an unfolding capacity in humanity that is finding itself in a manifestation more so and more so as we have great energy unfolding through events like Christ and Jesus working and merging, and that great unfolding of energy that was released, and how we too can move forward with these examples. And we've basically built that energy into our humanity by the accomplishments of the previous great examples throughout time. And so this hierarchical effort or intent or this guidance continues to take place, and there are different ways to access this information, and there are various there's various writings available and what have you that we can directly tie back to, and that they've been derived from this group at some level. And so that being the case, after the World War, the First World War, those in the hierarchy started to, well, they had for a long time, but they were seeing how, with the current situation of humanity, that the impending World War II, was looming large on the horizon. And they saw that this was a tremendous threat to humanity, that this was going to be a precipitation of a war that would be like no other up until this time. And the players that were amassing themselves and aligning themselves in the various Axis nations that had a very totalitarian slant and that were looking really to take over the world in a large regard. And so that was their aim and their intent, and this is very much against the spiritual intent of the evolutionary process of humanity and the unfolding process on a larger scale. And so this is against the law, if you will. And that being the case, we are allowed to break the law, we're allowed to make these mistakes and learn our lessons, but when a massive energy threatens the very existence of our whole entire humanity, as it did during that time, then there is a call to action that takes place, and there is issued forth more than just your usual hints and your suggestions and things of that nature. There is an actual call to action and an aligning that is asked to be implemented along these lines. The Allied forces that were the United States and all these other supposedly free nations against the totalitarian intent of the Axis nations. And so this cleavage, this dividing point in humanity was unprecedented. And it had culminated to such a point that our humanity, through previous karma and things of this nature, these unfoldings that took place after time, had to find an outlet. And to such an extreme degree in the World War. And so it had to be dealt with at that level in light of how tremendous and vast, again, a world war. So we have to think about it in that context. And so too do those that guide the race. And rather than just hope that the spiritually minded individuals and those potent workers and idealistic individuals and groups, the embryonic groups that were coming into being, rather than just completely allow them to continue to progress at whatever pace they had been, there was a request that the spiritually minded and those capable and potent individuals and idealistic workers would put their energy and effort specifically into the Allied forces' efforts to defeat totalitarianism and to help seal the door where evil is dwelled, occultly speaking. And that effort is of tremendous importance, and we still are working to completely seal the door where evil dwells, and that's an ongoing process taking place. That in this day and age, the fight against this intent to impose ideas on a large scale is still rampant on the globe. And so we have to, those responsible and those people that feel so compelled are the ones that are going to have to, again, sense the urges and understand the energies that they are out there, and to be receptive to and perceptive to what's floating out there, if you can consider it in those terms, and draw in what will be best for us to use to implement for our future unfolding. Now, again, considering that members of the hierarchy, so-called, did ask these potent workers through a series of pamphlets and other means, media means, that were available to get this written message out to, again, those that could be potential difference makers at that time. And so realizing the larger comprehensive picture and that this was really looming larger on the horizon than humanity had any clue of, and that it really had to be dealt with at that level in those terms. And so the lack of vision of humanity, again, caused the hierarchy to take a more proactive stance and to request that, again, the spiritually minded individuals and those potent workers, the idealistic individuals, could put their energies and efforts into the Allied forces' efforts to win the war, and to implement, outside of that, the future opportunity for fuller evolutionary expression. If we would have succumbed to the totalitarian forces, Hitler and the Italian and Japanese forces, things would be obviously very different, and the evolutionary process would be much, much hindered, to say the least. The expression of spirit would be much subjugated, and ideas would be more kept into check and suppressed than they are currently in our day and age, which has a high degree of that. But it's more overt. Excuse me, more covert rather than overt and obvious. And I think what the real difference would be that our chains and our bondage would be a lot more apparent and obvious than it is now, where it's more mental and more psychological, although largely prevalent and nonetheless. So keeping in mind that in 1934, a series of pamphlets was beginning to be issued by some of the members, one in particular, Joel Kuhl, who was, again, a you consider a disciple of Christ, a living example of a high state of human potential that would work behind the scenes, but in this case work with those potential groups and individuals that could help get this information out at this crucial time. And so a series of pamphlets came out giving warnings and indications of some potential options and of the opportunity to implement wise planning and activity that would be impelled by the soul and by our spiritual will as much as we can understand and tap into it. And some sensed the need and responded, but the numbers that did actually respond in kind and in a real meaningful fashion were relatively small, in the totality of everything. And so they didn't meet the measured needs. The energy didn't amalgamate and blend and gel, and so that energy didn't have the proper force that it would need, spiritually minded force, to set things aright and to put things in an orderly fashion before a huge conflict unfoiled and embroiled our whole globe. And so that it could have been staved off more so. That's not to say that conflict wouldn't have erupted at some level, but there could have been the implementation by the right thinking minded individuals and the group effort, the subsequent group effort, the energy and the force that would have been implemented through these individuals to change the tide, to sway the public opinion adequately enough to bring into manifestation the proper ideas, proper obviously being a relative term as to what's proper, but as most people would agree, of ideas of the good, the true, and the beautiful, things that allow people to have expressions of free will, expressions of their own intent, if they want to worship a certain way, think a certain way, act a certain way, things of that nature that won't be imposed on. We want to just essentially have our freedom, and that was in real danger of being imposed on as it is today. And that's a real point to get back to and consider, is that the level of timidity, the level of lack of courage in not only the spiritually minded individuals that were understanding of these occult means, if you want to use that term, the ways in which energy moves thought, or excuse me, thought moves energy rather, and that our thoughts can direct force. And so a collective thought could have helped, again, ease and make the transition much more easy. Definitely the birth of this new condition could have been much easier if the people could have been activated in the proper means. Certainly, communication means were not quite what they were in this day and age, and little things of that nature that we can point to and see that these might have been part of the shortcomings. But really what it boiled down to is the lack of courage, the timidity of those focused, polarized individuals, spiritually minded or otherwise, those that had the understanding, the idealistic understanding and the intent ultimately to put into effect something that could help change. They were sorely lacking. They did not come together in a group effort, in a spirit of cooperation, in the sense that they could have. Now, I'm not saying they're going to gather collectively on the physical plane in a group and march on the mall in Washington. More so just getting our energies and intent together. Energy travels vast distances, and our thoughts, the energy that our thoughts comprise, can travel vast distances with not much effort. And that's part of esoteric science, is understanding that capacity, tapping into it and using it for some means, putting something into manifestation on the physical plane. Some call that magic. It's whatever term you choose to use. Nonetheless, it's bringing your will into manifestation at some level, hopefully by blending your will with the larger will of God to your best ability and understanding, again, for the helping of humanity. And so this unfolding of the will and this idea that the potent workers during that time between World War I and World War II did have the potential, and they had the opportunity to get together and work. And this did not happen. Again, we could point to different various things, but ultimately, again, lack of courage. Timidity was the main downfall that prevented that further fleshing out, that further moving forward. And so we see this again being the case, that in this day and age, we're right on the cusp of our, really, actually firmly, what am I saying? We're not on the cusp, but we're firmly implanted and entrenched in a war on terrorism and other various wars on. war on this, war on that. Ideological wars, ultimately, that are psychologically driven and anxiety-based and fear-driven. And that is what's also keeping people, making them have the lack of courage, or it's forcing them to think things in a certain way that's preventing them, that's causing this lack, because much enfrightenment is taking place globally, and that is being implemented, again, psychologically at many, many levels. And so to counter that, the individuals that have adequate enlightenment and understanding and perception of a more comprehensive picture can, again, hopefully work cooperatively to implement the proper structure to bring a reordering about that would be easier, hopefully, and more along the lines of a spiritual evolutionary unfolding that is right and proper according to divine law. As we ignore the law, we make it much more difficult on ourselves, and so we don't take full opportunity. Now, I'm not saying that in every instant of every second of every day, I'm doing everything that I possibly can to help this out. I fall short just as much as anyone else does. But we still, to be aware and to be alert and understanding and be informed is very important, and then we can decide how and when and where we want to lay our efforts and energy. And if we want to get involved, or if we want to run and turn tail and run the other direction, or if you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice, to quote the Canadian poet Neil Peart. It's very appropriate, and that's where we find ourselves. We find ourselves active, indifferent, or retroactive and running away. So those, pretty much, you can sum it up at those levels. And again, certain individuals are going to perceive of and understand more so, and they're going to see a bigger, fuller, comprehensive unfolding taking place. Those are the individuals, theoretically, that would be the ones that could take these ideas and run with them and make them into something meaningful. And it's certainly my hope that these individuals will stay active, and that they'll stay interested, and they'll stay focused with their massed intent to make these things come into some means of manifestation, something real and tangible that we can work with. That's how the creation process works. It starts with a thought. In the beginning was the Word. Before the Word, obviously, there was a thought to think that word through and to express that word. And that process holds true eternally. We create on a smaller scale in that same manner. So as we make our thoughts aligned and orderly, we can move with that amassed energy with great force and direction. And the lack of courage will do much to just dissipate and deteriorate and just make it crumble into dust and nothingness. We have to have focus with that energy to keep it intact and to keep it potent and doing its cutting work. Again, if there's lack of courage or lack of focus, that energy is going to dissipate and fall by the wayside. And this is something that we have to take into consideration and keep firmly in mind, that as we're able to keep our intent energized and focused, so will be the rewards of the work, and will be the evidence of what we're able to amalgamate. We will see the end results of what we're able to put into process as we're able to successfully put this energy again into some kind of forceful direction. It's going to, it really, again, depends on how much people want to choose to put aside their personal ambitions and selfish whims for a more comprehensive understanding, and how, again, they're willing to implement their own energy, time, and effort into something that would allow for a greater unfolding of this evolutionary process. Certain people are going to tap into it, again, at a more comprehensive level, others at a lesser level. Everyone perceives, rain falls on everyone the same. It's just how deep is it going to soak in the ground in certain areas, and how much is it going to do its nurturing and nourishing work. It remains to be seen, and it's very much like that. These ideas come down on everyone, or find their way into the minds and ultimately the brains of mankind. It's just to what level. Because oftentimes people take an idea and it's just they become obsessed with it. They are compelled to do something. And you see that playing itself out, some more forcefully and willfully than others. And so again, that's an idea of falling back on examples that we have available, other members of our human family that have put this energy into effect and done something to accomplish something great to help us move forward. They did not have timidity. They did not have lack of courage. They had courage in abundance. And so I would encourage everyone to work to try to instill that capacity inside of us. That is really our birthright. It's our spiritual, it's part of our spiritual component makeup, that we have no fear within ourselves. Fear is something that is really against creation. It's against God. Although certainly it's a manifestation for a reason. It allows us to see what we have. We need something to work against. We need something to push off and rub against, the yin to the yang concept. And so it just allows us the contrast, to the vision, to see the contrast, to see what's desirable and see what's undesirable. And spiritual inclination and intuition and all these things will allow us to see what is proper and to work to gear ourselves magnetically towards what is right and proper. And we just, when we trust our intuition, when we fall back on the soul as our center of guidance, then these things become second nature, and we can understand, again, more so the comprehensive picture, how we play our roles in that, and how this unfolding process can take place. We can really have a vision. We can look out on the horizon and envision what is likely to take place and how we can, again, play our role in it at some level. With this, again, this war on terror, there are many individuals that are afraid at some level to come into the playing arena. They want to watch and be spectators, but they don't want to jump in and play the game for whatever reasons. And no disrespect to anyone that chooses to be an observer, but you know, you get more experience when you jump in and get your hands dirty, get your feet wet. That's just the bottom line, and that's what living is all about. Is experiential. An experiential process that through living you learn and you gain and you grow. And as we shirk our responsibilities, as we run away, we prevent those lessons from playing themselves out, and we'll have to fall back on those lessons, come back to those lessons another day. So that's something to keep in mind too. We can't escape our obligations and our duties, and so they will find us and they'll track us down. Now again, the idea that many individuals of spiritual-minded nature that are inclined along those lines, that have that potency in them, they are basically an expression of light, if you will. Not light as from a light bulb necessarily, but the living light that animates all things. There are more potent expressors of light, and we can see that in an example like a Mother Teresa or Gandhi, the revolutionary American, those that helped bring that about. And these are examples, again, that we can see of those more potent human workers. They found their areas of work that they were best suited for, and they put into effect something great and grand and beautiful that stays with humanity. It's built into the fabric of our unfolding evolution. And so again, this light capacity is demonstrated in certain individuals and through certain groups. And as it finds expression in a more fuller and real sense, those will be the potent movers and shakers as the future unfolds, because we have more so the opportunity for energy to be used. We have the capacity. We're becoming more evolved, so we're becoming more potent magicians, if you will. And so we're able to implement these ideas and take thought and bring it into some activity in a much more meaningful manner than we were able to do this previously. Mass communication and a lot of other things are part of that bring this into fruition, that bring it into manifestation. So as we see this unfolding taking place, the spiritually minded individuals are again at the edge of having an opportunity for vast change, especially as we're entering this Aquarian dispensation, and that is allowing for, again, vast change. Those that understand their opportunity and their place can take more of a take-charge role. They can really get down to it and implement what it is that they are idealistically sensing. They can put these things into practice, and that's happening more so, and we're having that potent ability enhanced within humanity to an extreme degree, and it's really, really bubbling up and brewing in our humanity at so many levels. And if we could see the rapid pace at which things are transitioning and changing, I have to do 50 million shows to even get into that aspect. But it's anybody that really is halfway awake can look and see through the media and other means, and just in their own area, their own community, through their own life, how rapidly transitioning and how abrupt change is finding its way into manifestation. And we're all subject to that at some level. as to how we want to take charge and how we want to ride the crest of the wave for the helping of humanity, or if we want to, again, run away when we see the waves coming, try to find a safe haven. That's our option as well. But the spiritually minded individuals have an opportunity to get together and work if they so choose. It's really up to each individual how much time, trouble, energy, effort they want to bring to any group endeavor, and how magnetic they can be in order to reach out and have a sympathetic response with those that are like-minded and that can help them in the work. If we really put out that beacon and that vibe, and we send out that signal in that proper fashion, if we are more than just talking the talk, if we're really walking the walk, we'll ring out in a real living manner that magnetic rapport, and we'll find coming back to us those that can help us out. And that's part and parcel of this as well. We have a real ability now to do this. And there are also those that are more politically minded, and they shirk ideas of spirituality. They maybe don't have a large, comprehensive understanding of the spiritual or the occult nature, the cause behind the physical effect. And so they are, due to that lack of vision, they might be fearful as well. And so I would really encourage the more politically astute minded individuals and those individuals to also understand the opportunities available and to not shirk responsibility, to, again, foster a sense of courage, to not have a lack of courage or have timidity in your work, because that's going to prevent coming together on a larger scale group cooperation of like-minded individuals. So many individuals are into freedom, the concept of freedom, regardless of their affiliations or their group amalgamations or what have you. The intent is freedom, free will, hopefully ultimately right human relations, goodwill towards their fellow man, things of that nature. And so if we can work on those, merge our cooperation, merge our efforts, and get past these separate attitudes and the limiting attitudes and the fear, get past the fear, get past the timidity, get past the lack of courage, and understand. The loving understanding is really sorely lacking and is what's really needed now. And so in a spirit of cooperation, if we can understand our ability and are able to come together as living links of light, and that's really what it would be akin to, is having points of light all over the globe connecting their focused force with other individuals and other groups. And so this will ultimately have an encompassing or encasing the globe in a light, if you will, in a spiritual and a soul light, as we're able to perceive it and manifest it. And that really, that vision is something that's worth holding in our minds, as far as the potential, the potency, and what we have available in the future. We can make this globe a living, lighted, loving place. It's really up to our efforts and how we're willing to implement the proper ideas and intent to bring this about, as we're willing to work, as we feel compelled to do so. So again, overcoming inertia and ignorance, and don't talk about it, be about it. That's really important. Don't talk about it, be about it. I can't emphasize that enough. Self-responsibility, self-reliance, and get past timidity, get past the lack of courage. If you believe in reincarnation like I do, then death is really, it's just a transition. You just go from one set of clothes. I'm wearing a Corey suit currently, as you can tell. I'm going to dispense of this in the near future, and I'll pick up another more appropriate and adequate vessel or vehicle that will allow me to hopefully carry on what I perceive of as my service to humanity. And so I'll maintain along those lines as I'm able. But again, death should not be a concern. That should not prevent us from making our fullest efforts, because death is just it's a temporary transition. Fear of death is a huge stumbling block, and it's a fallacy. There is no death in actuality. So keep that firmly in mind, please, as well. And that would be a real helpful reminder in times of trouble for us to fall back on, that reassurance, if we can. Let me go ahead and grab some calls. Hello, caller, are you on the air?
Yes, sir.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing great. So basically you're saying in your theory that we are created by animals.
I'm not sure how you got that. No, that's not correct.
I heard something about you talking about evolution.
Yes, absolutely. You could see examples of evolution through our humanity, through the animal kingdoms. There are a lot of ways that you can see evolution taking place right before our eyes. That's like with a parrot learning a language and being able to communicate for all intents and purposes with its owners. That's an example of evolution. Look at sports. We've been able through sports medicine and through training the physical vehicle to be able to be faster, stronger, and the records keep getting shattered because we are evolving. There's no, to argue against that would be, I don't know, I think you could probably argue against it if you wanted to, but I think you would ultimately be wrong. To see evolution in effect, it's not difficult to do. I think most thinking individuals with the facts at hand could see that there's evidence, a lot of evidence for evolution, again, not just humanity, but again, the animal kingdoms and the lesser kingdoms are changing constantly, rapidly, right before our eyes. So is there anything else you care to add along those lines?
Yes, sir, I would love to. One of my other ways of thinking is there any basic facts or evidence of the nature of being an animal from the ocean, or is it just that you want to represent something that is a false thing?
Yeah, I'm gonna let you go on that. I'm not sure if I'm completely following you. As far as something from the ocean having consciousness or something along those lines, certainly there's consciousness in the lesser kingdoms, but self-consciousness, being able to say, I am that I am, is strictly a human condition and the levels above our human condition. Before we gain self-consciousness, we go on instinct strictly. Certainly, some of the domesticated animals are showing examples of the evolutionary process in effect, and we can look back to that, but they still are, it's very embryonic, and they go on instinct. So there's evolution, but the unconscious instinctual drive that drives the animal kingdoms is not the same as the self-conscious thinking nature that is manifest and evolves through humanity. Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Oh, hey, it's Mo. I was just
Hey.
going to say something funny.
Go ahead.
I'm real, this isn't me, but this is just an imaginary somebody. I'm really wealthy, and I have a nice home, and I just got a big Humvee, and I thought that would fill me up, but I'm still just real empty inside.
Why do you think that is?
Well, because that stuff just really has no substance ultimately.
Couldn't
And
agree with you
that's
more.
where those things are failing me. And another funny thing, too, whenever you hear whole fundamentalists just say, well, it says all you need to know just right there in the Bible, something funny is, why is the God of the Bible sort of the angry patriarch, well, why is he so seemingly insecure and always needing to receive praise? It just really seems kind of funny and
Anti-God,
odd. And I prefer to think that God was just lonely, and that's what we're all doing here. It wanted some friends to hang out with and have fun and just see nice things happen. And, of course, craziness is allowed, but that's what you get with free will.
Right.
Talk to you later, Corey. Thanks.
Hey, thanks. I really appreciate your comments. Yeah, very insightful, as always. I appreciate that, definitely. I look at it in that same sense as well, that's more akin to my idea of creation, that it's for the evolutionary process is a fun unfolding. It's a learning process. It's a discovering process. It's experiential. It's experimental. It's allowing, very allowing. It allows for a lot of change, flux, different things going on. But if we look to material things, I think, yeah, we're going to fall short of that, something that really fulfills us. That's time and time again. If you think, even in my life, I think I know there are things that I seek to acquire. Maybe it's a particular record album that I've been looking for a number of years or something. When I finally gain it and grab it, yeah, I'm happy to hear it, but then the search is over and that sense of accomplishment and all that is kind of falls by the wayside. You've gained it, you've attained it, and now you're looking for something else. I'm constantly falling victim to that myself, so I can understand at that level, that example. Hello, caller, are you on the air?
Gassing Jews is fun. Jews.
I think some people thought that previously, and those were the individuals that we were collectively working against to work against the imposition of ideas. It's Hello, caller, you on the air?
Herbert's been found, FBU.
Hey, brother, I thought you were going to move to Boston already. Boston, Basher, Beantown. That's where your fight is, my friend. You should really, this is my suggestion. Get your crew, get on up to Beantown, because that's the thick of the struggle for your area of endeavor. Here in Austin, allowing access. These are words with an A. That is what's going on here. Allowing. There are other areas for bashing, and I think, that's just my slant on it. I think your fight's elsewhere, honestly, but that's just me. Thanks for viewing. Have a nice evening. Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Hey, what's up, man? How you doing?
How are you?
All right. Hey, you want to get somebody to bite that pimple off your face, man? That shit looks real.
Thanks for your concern. I think I'll keep it. I'm kind of fond of it. Thank you nonetheless.
Timidity won't save the fag bitch.
Timidity. Hello, caller, you on the air?
Timber Creek.
Okay. Actually, in all honesty, I am glad to hear your voice because, I think about you from time to time. I hope you're doing well and hope you're doing well. So I'm glad to hear you're calling and see that you're viewing as well. Hello, caller, you're on the air? Okay. Thanks for that comment. I did hear earlier in the day that there was a big power outage down south, so I don't know if that's preventing a fuller viewership or what's going on along those lines, but hopefully the power had been restored before 8 so folks can view this fine access programming that's being broadcast.
Fag bitches unite.
Okay, I see we've got a couple of calls, but I am going to recap a bit before I flesh this thing out completely. And I do want to, again, remind people that it does take, first of all, a sense of responsibility, something, the little light bulb has to go off in our heads for us to want to think about something enough for it to be like a thorn in our side or something poking and prodding at us enough to where, okay, we get up. We finally make that move to get up and we go for it and we try to accomplish something. There's a lot of idle talk that goes on everywhere. Certainly I'm sitting here talking, so, I could be accused of that equally as well. But it expands or extends past that. When you have that sense of responsibility and you try to get out and activate people and bring a larger sense of understanding, bring a sense of accomplishment to what you're doing so that you can try to set an example for folks at the very least. You can argue with my discourse, with what I'm laying out here, my presentation, but if I set the proper life example, which I'm definitely hoping to do, then that is hard to argue against a living example. So that's something to consider. Hello, caller, you're on the air. Hello, caller, you're on the air, line 3.
Do you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, I appreciate your message about overcoming timidity. I think that's a very positive and important message for people to understand. My question is, are you encouraging people generally, humans generally around the world to overcome timidity? And what about specifically the people in Iraq, the Iraqis, and maybe the Palestinians as well? Are you encouraging them to overcome timidity as well? I'll hang up and listen. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll let you go on that one. That's a great question. I am very much encouraging those folks. I see those people in an opportunity. Again, we're all in a real pickle in overall, but there are certain pockets that are where it's more out of hand and really more accentuated than others. And certainly the Middle East has always been that pocket, just as the Serbia and Yugoslavia, and that pocket has been a powder keg traditionally throughout time by the ideologies that are expressed and what have you. But the ideas that are being expressed now and early embryonic freedoms being expressed and changing the guard, if you will, in that area is being implemented. And so, yes, my thoughts and prayers go to those people often because they are in this definite disruptive position. And it's going to take all the courage that they can muster as a people to proceed with the imposition of all the forces. And the militia people that are being fought against, the so-called militias in these areas, are basically just the citizens that are having conflict with the perceived liberators or perceived invaders, whatever they're thought of as. And so these are the people that are just trying to defend their homelands largely, I feel like, in that regard. and they're falling subject to what they perceive as an occupation. So that spirit of free will is in that area being subjugated at many levels. And so a real expression through those peoples is being prevented. They're being treated like little children by the global community and by the military-industrial complex. We're not allowing them to take care of their own affairs in a proper fashion. They have some toys that we want to play with, and so we are imposing on them in their playpen so that we can make use of their resources, their toys, and play with that until we get sick of them, and then we'll move on and find another area of conquest in which to do our gig. And so this is the intelligent-minded individuals, regardless of their party politics, regardless of what their religious dispensation is or whatever, need to stand firm and stand battle-ready and understand our kinship to our fellow humans, and that what goes on in these areas, whether we see it firsthand or we hear the filtered down media reports and that largely inaccurate, twisted, biased, massive information that we're fed, we have to be discerning and keep in mind these real struggles that are going on in that area, and that the vast majority of people in that part of the world are very young, largely speaking. Iran, Iraq, the vast numbers of individuals there, 35 years and younger. And so the youthful vigor of those people is also propelling this and is preventing a lot of the just going along with the so-called liberators of the occupation coalition of the willing that's finding their home in Iraq and potentially branching its tentacles out again into other areas of the Middle East. So we have to be cautious of that, and I think this is where the spiritually minded and the politically focused individuals can find common ground to come together to see what needs to be done. We get our energies focused and our intent aligned in a manner that will bring something to bear on this problem in a real fashion. Energy does follow thought, as the physicists tell us, and we can use our thoughts collectively and our collective bargaining ability, if you will, through massed intent, through public opinion, to bring this into being. And that may sound fanciful to some, that just by thinking a thought you can change things, but it's what it starts with. It starts with thought, and then it finds its way into manifestation. If nobody thought about something, how would it ever become something that's implementable, that can be activated? So the thinking individuals have to be activated. They have to get past their timidity, their separate ideas, their ignorance, their inertia, and come together to see that there is one humanity emerging. Certain groups of humanity are more in need of our help and our prayers and our energies than others. Now again, help, prayers, and energies, they're not in need of our holding their hand like little children. These are countries that have been part of the world community. Iraq is an ancient country. It's a very old country, and to treat the group like children, or anyone in that area like children, as we are doing globally, is a mistake. It's going to have repercussions that will fall back and get us. So we need to help those people out in that sense. Send them our energies, focused intent to uplift all of our areas of endeavor. I want to thank folks for taking the opportunity to view. I encourage you to check out Therefore I Am every Tuesday, 10 p.m., Channel 16. Also Reality Expander every Thursday, 10 p.m., Channel 16. I want to thank my producer, Chris, for commanding the helm of the Starship Esoterica. I want to thank everybody for viewing again. Austin, take care of yourself. Have a nice evening, and don't have lack of courage. Don't have timidity. Focus. Be battle ready. Let's do this. Thanks.